Right, okay. Last time, on Gran Turismo 4, we did the 1000 Miles Cup, and if you're asking why the game completion is up to 52.2%, well that's because I actually did the first 5 races of the GT All-Stars and actually tried to see if I could get through the second half. However, because I am doing this as a summer stretch, naturally the summer heat, one way or another, was going to take a toll on me. And because I was just dissatisfied with the way that my first overall attempt went, I basically tried again with another car, and also that really didn't work either. So I decided to do some grinding to just get back the money that I lost. I think this is the exact amount I was on before. I tried using the Jag XJR9 before, but the main problem I had with this thing was it just had way too much drag, which under the circumstances basically led to the tyres pretty much getting shredded to ribbons. Even when I tried grippier sets, the tyres were still getting absolutely shredded to ribbons. I then tried using the Ford GT with the Stage 3 engine upgrade, but again, I was still having the same problems with oversteer. And I wasn't prepared to go down without a fight, because I really did fight with this thing as much as I possibly could to try and see if it would beat that fucking Nissan R92. But that didn't work either. So I did some grinding, I got some extra money, I was able to get myself another 05 Ford GT without the stripes, because, well, that was one way of how I got my money back. And I also, as you would have guessed, got another Toyota RSC. You probably know what's going to happen now. So I'm going to sell this thing just to get some extra money, just in case. And now that I have got that, it's basically now time for me to use the only car that can really hold a candlestick to the Nissan R92, and that's this, the Nissan R89C. I'm not dicking about with the other choices I thought about using anymore. It's basically R89 or bust at this point. I honestly don't care what happens anymore. I really want to try and see if I can sweep this. So in terms of our tyres, we should be fine. We've got all the sets we need. And because these races will be slightly shorter than what we have in the GT World Championship, I think in terms of everything else we should be fine. Because the R89 is relatively similar to the R92 in terms of just, just the general horsepower and torque that does manage to really hold a candlestick to the friggin' R92. So as I said before, I did half of the races already. We're doing 4 championships as a part of the summer stretch, and this is now the second one. The Gran Turismo All-Stars, and where if we sweep everything we will get a maximum of 250,000 credits. A race between cars created for speed to determine which one is supreme. So 10 races as we're heading to High Speed Ring Reverse, Fuji Speedway 80s, then we've got Laguna Seca, followed by Autumn Ring Reverse, then we had the Test Course, then we've got Grand Valley, followed by Suzuka, Sonoma, Le Mans, and to end it off, Nürburgring. And by the way, yes, this is the same thumbnail image for this event that we had in GT3. Okay, 100 grand if we can win overall. Let's go. And hope we do it this time. And just as I would have guessed, the whole field is prototypes. So we've got the Nissan R92, which is basically the supreme leader of these other prototypes. We've also got the Bentley Speed 8, the Nissan R390, the Toyota 7, and the Mazda 787B. I was honestly just falling into agony, trying to see if I could actually use another car that was capable of winning this, and then eventually I had to just surrender to fate. And that was why I eventually wound up choosing the Nissan R89, because, well, it's the only car that can really hold a candlestick to the R92, if I'm being totally honest. Don't need to qualify. Okay, let's go. Got the super slicks on, so hopefully we can go into this with a fighting chance. And also because, well, I really don't want to have to do any of these races again if I can get the sweep. It's honestly the only car I have that can really, as I said before, hold even a candlestick to the R92. Because both the R89 and the R92 are just so evenly matched when it comes to their performance specs. Of course, between these two, I did have one loss to the R92 in the GT World Championship at Hong Kong, and that was mainly because, well, I was trying to go to the end of the race on a set of super slicks, but unfortunately the car... But unfortunately, the super slicks also have their limits. And in Hong Kong, I can certainly say that because of the abrasive track surface in Hong Kong, that definitely proved to be pretty much the nail in the coffin that stopped me from achieving the sweep in the GT World Championship. So basically after that loss, I knew that when we got to Opera Paris later on in the championship, I basically needed to change tyres if I was going to pull it off. That was just one thing that literally needed to happen if I was going to achieve 9 out of 10 wins the way that I did. I was honestly forced into making this decision because, as I said before, this was probably the best choice I could have made for this, with the cars I currently have in my garage. There really isn't any other car I could have used for this. It's kind of like if you're looking at the... It's kind of like if you're looking at the 1976 F1 World Championship in a way. Where, if you've watched the film Rush, then you will know that James Hunt signed with McLaren because it was the only car in the field that could really keep up with the Ferrari. And in my case, I chose the R89 because, well, when you really get down to it, it's the only car, basically, construction-wise from the ground up, that really does have a fighting chance of beating the R92 in a straight-up dogfight. Because the two of them are just so evenly matched. And that's pretty much what I'm proving here as well. By dominating the first race at High Speed Ring, and I really want to make sure that this time around I get the sweep, no questions asked. This was basically the only car I could really use. I did try other options, but they failed. This car is basically my shining light to pull this off. And I now have a 16-second lead, so providing my pace continues like this, I could potentially walk away with a margin of victory of less than 20 seconds. Depending on what happens. As long as I didn't make any... Oh, god damn it. Yep, okay. As long as I didn't make a mistake. Like that. Son of a bitch. Well, I had a feeling it was going to happen eventually. That just seemed inevitable. I wasn't going to completely get through this race without at least one mistake. But I think it's fair to say that this is pretty much my benefactor in terms of pulling this off. The only question I really have is, unlike last time, can I manage to get the sweep? That's the real question I have. I think it is definitely possible now, but I have no guarantees in saying that is going to happen, as the pollen continues to try and quite literally kill my throat. Anyway. Got a sizable advantage at the top. And it looks like at this point there really is nothing else to do except just continue to pull away. As we head over the bridge one more time, and now through the right-hander. There probably are other cars I could have used for this if I really wanted to, but I chose the R89 for a reason, because, well, I need a car that I know is going to win. And that's how I pull this off. 48 points, and I finished that race in just over 7 minutes. And that's the end of race 1, with the R92 second, the Mazda third, the Bentley fourth, Toyota fifth, and the third Nissan, the R390, in sixth and last. With my 908 horsepowered R89, I win race 1. And now, let's head on to race 2 at Fuji Speedway 80s, where we are pretty much going to be going foot to the fucking floor. Okay, here we go. And of course I have traction control on as well because, well, this is a fucking prototype after all. And in order to really tame 900 horsepower, you kind of need traction control. I'm just saying that as a piece of advice. Anyway. Yeah, it just really pushed me to a point where it doesn't matter what I use anymore. I just want to try and get it over with, so then I can move on to whatever next thing I do. As I now clear the Toyota 7, and once again, I am right behind the R92, closing in. And one advantage I have with this thing is the fact that I can actually hold a candlestick against him and still be quick while not losing too much time. This really was a case where I just virtually had no other choice. Because considering I was literally just getting hammered and crushed by the R92 before, there really wasn't anything else I could risk doing just to have a fighting chance. This was the only sensible choice I could make, and I probably knew it from the start. Because, in all honesty, this car basically is my old reliable when it comes to beating the Group C prototypes. Because of where it's just slightly better than the best prototypes in this game. And since I have taken over the lead officially, it looks like scoring the clean sweep at this point is very possible. Yeah, by the way, with the original Fuji Speedway, which is basically what this layout was, you were practically just going foot to the floor for most of the lap. I would have honestly said about 85 if not 90% of the lap. Shit. That did not work at all. And... fuck you. I knew that was gonna happen. God damn it. Well, thankfully at least, my car does have pace. I fucking hate these high-speed circuits. The ones where you know that even if you get loose once, you're just gonna fucking die. Once the AI comes behind you, they're just gonna fucking murder you. I'm really not a fan of these high-speed tracks where that is the only way to just fucking do it. It's partly the reason why I really am just pissed off at the moment. Because I feel like I've literally just had wool pulled over my eyes. And then literally someone just pissing down my back. And telling me that there's no way to win this. But amazingly, in spite of the huge wreck I had, and pretty much just being drilled out the way by the AI, I somehow come back, because of my raw speed with this thing, to get back up into second. In spite of literally all that chaos that just ensued, I somehow find a way to get back into this. And again, as I said before, the summer heat is likely taking a toll on me as well. But anyway, back to what I was saying before. Wait, what was I saying before? Oh yeah. Around 85%, if not 90% of the lap on the original Fuji Speedway, it really was a proper Speedway variant when it came to road course designs. I mean, this practically is the road course equivalent of what you could argue a super speedway essentially is, where you're literally just pushing your car right to the absolute limit, and where you're practically just driving like a bat out of hell to somehow get the absolute best speed out of whatever car it was you were using. Because for at least 80% of the lap, you're just going foot to the floor. And I'm also pretty sure if I would have made that mistake in any of my other cars, I would have had zero chance to recover. But thankfully with this one, however, that did not turn out to be the case. As I head down the front straightaway, and somehow, in spite of my errors, I came back to win by 5 seconds. And it probably would have been a lot more had I not had that spin. But whatever, it's fine. We've scored 2 wins on the trot now, and they were pretty easy ones as well. So, there we go. And the field at this time remains mostly unchanged. And am I going to park up in this part of the track again? Yes, I am. I have no idea why that keeps happening, but it does. Anyway, pretty much Noah's Ark in terms of the points we currently have. 20 points to me, and 12 points to the R92. As I am now already 60 grand up on everyone else. Should I save this replay? Yeah, why not? I saved it here before with the Jaguar, so yeah, I'll do the same again, but just overwrite it. Wait, hold on. Oh, it just goes back to that. Whatever, don't care. I just want to get this out the door and not have to do this again. That's all I want. I just want this fucking thing to be out the door so I can then focus on getting through the next thing. Okay, replay saved. Now, let's go and do the other 3 races and try to see if we can sweep them. Well, here we are again, Laguna Seca. Can we score redemption? I certainly hope so. Every time I've raced here in the GT All-Stars, I have lost by big margins. Hopefully this is where that now changes, as with the first 2 races alone, I have already driven 35 miles, to add on to the 373 miles that I drove in the GT World Championship. And, oh, I am getting bullied by the R390. Fuck you. And I've now pulled away from him, so now we can hopefully set off after the R92. Or if we don't, then well, at least I can say I tried. Because the R92 around here, he has just been an absolute beast. He's practically been about as fast as the Starship Enterprise in terms of just his raw speed up to this point. He's literally just been hammering me as well as everyone else, and that's what's really been pissing me off the most. And I did have to very much punt that Toyota 7 out the way just so I would not have to deal with anyone else. I knew he was just going to be blocking me, so I basically just had to punt him out the way so I could just focus on the R92. Not exactly something I like to use every day, but at this point, it's honestly pretty much a gaping wound that needs to be threaded. And the only way I can really do that is if no one is blocking me from in front or behind. This is one battle I basically need to win for pride, because I really need to show the R92 that he's not the only one who can just absolutely blitz the field with just his outright speed. And thankfully, for me at least, this car seems to be doing just that. Oh yeah, by the way, James Hunt's rival in the F1 World Championship in 1976. His name, by the way, was Niki Lauda. who at the time was the reigning world champion, as he was driving for Ferrari at the time. And he basically did turn Ferrari into a winning team again in the mid to late 70s. As while Ferrari dominated motorsport in the early 60s, they also had a rivalry with other manufacturers as well. The most notable of those in the 60s being Ford. And the one thing that's ironic about the McLaren is, during that season, is that it was powered by the all-conquering Cosworth DFV engine, which under the circumstances is considered by many to be F1's winningest engine, because it was basically a Ford V8 that was created by Cosworth. In other words, to put it simply, it was basically a Cosy engine. And it basically went on to win at least 100 races. I couldn't tell you how many races it won precisely, but it was definitely more than 100 races with just how successful it was. I mean, a majority of the field at that time in the 70s, they basically were using Ford Cosworth engines because they knew a lot of the time how good they were. And the teams who knew how to work it best, that was basically how they were able to emerge onto the scene as Grand Prix winners. And ironically, even Williams, in the early 80s, when they won 3 straight Drivers' Championships, well, 2 straight Constructors' Championships, and then 2 of 3 Drivers' Championships from 1980 to 82. Wait, hold on. That doesn't sound right. Okay, let me correct myself. So Williams swept both the Constructors' and Drivers' Championship in 1980. And then they went on to win the Constructors' Championship again in 81, but lost the Drivers' Championship to Nelson Piquet, who was driving for Brabham. And then Keke Rosberg, who funnily enough replaced Carlos Reutemann, who was the second Williams driver at the time, who finished runner-up to Nelson in the 81 championship by a single point. Well, Carlos decided he'd had enough, so then Keke Rosberg effectively replaced his seat in the second Williams. And because 82 itself is considered by many to be F1's craziest year to date, with a total of 11 winners in 16 races, something that would absolutely never happen today. There were 11 different winners in 1982. That's a record that will likely never be broken. I can tell you that for sure. And Keke Rosberg, even though he did not compete in every race that year, he still found a way to come out with the championship, because consistency was ultimately what helped him to beat the absent Didier Auriol, who under most circumstances would have likely won the championship had it not been for him losing the plot after his feud with Ferrari teammate Gilles Villeneuve at the time, Had the two of them not fallen out, and had Didier Auriol just not went insane and practically destroyed both his legs in a practice accident, I have no doubt in saying that Didier would have most likely been the F1 World Champion of 1982. Of course, fate later would repay the favour for Didier, because whilst his promising F1 career ended with a practice accident where he quite literally destroyed both of his legs, fate later would repay the favour 5 years later. Anyways, I win. I finally get mine over the R92 at Laguna Seca. I finally beat him. Thank God. I actually beat him. And the Toyota 7 finished third in that race. Well, it doesn't really cause much of a shake-up in the points, but at least it means the Noah's Ark results are now basically out of it. But there we go. It's a hat-trick of wins to me over the R92, the 787B third, and now we have a tie for fourth between the Toyota and the Bentley. And well, the R390, well, he's just there, basically. But anyway, we've done 3 races now. Now let's move on to race 4. But yeah, as I said before, had Didier Auriol not had that practice accident crash that prematurely ended his career, he probably would have been the world champion that year. And it also would have been only 18 years that it would have taken Michael Schumacher to win the Drivers' Championship after that. Of course, F1 back then was a lot more dangerous than what it is today. And the one thing that's even crazier about 1982 is the fact that it did also have 2 fatalities. Gilles Villeneuve was one of them, and the other one was Riccardo Paletti. And the one thing that makes it even more ironic is that because of where they were from in both Canada and Italy respectively, well, obviously the Montreal circuit was renamed in Gilles Villeneuve's honour, and there is also a certain circuit in Italy as well that was renamed in honour of Riccardo Paletti as well, who under the circumstances lost his life during that year's Canadian Grand Prix, as the R92 runs wide, as do the Toyota 7 and the Mazda as well. And as a result of all that chaos, I ultimately work my way to the front. But yeah, there is definitely one racetrack in Italy that I know is named after Riccardo Paletti, who from what I can remember lost his life during a start line skirmish, during a first lap skirmish at the Canadian Grand Prix that same year, which ultimately killed him. And it hasn't been the first time that F1 has had a recorded fatality because of a first lap collision. There have actually been a few instances where that was the case. But again, F1 at that time was still very dangerous, even in the early 80s. And although there were safety changes made for the mid-80s, I would honestly argue that it wasn't up until at least the late 80s when the safety in motorsport overall, and when you could honestly argue that the regularities of drivers getting either seriously injured or killed during race day weekends, that did not become less of a common theme until at least the late 80s, when safety really was beginning to take full effect. Although there would still be tragedies that would follow along the way, but either way, F1 itself, like pretty much every other forms of motorsport, well, unless it's rallying of course, then in which case, aside from a few things here and there that do in essence improve the safety, rallying is probably the one thing that I would honestly say is still very much vulnerable to the object that from time to time can kill you. And of course, more recently, that did also happen to Craig Bean. No wait, hold on. Let me rephrase that. Of course, that did recently happen to the Irishman Craig Breen, who was competing in the WRC before he lost his life in a rallying accident. The first fatality the WRC has had for nearly 20 years. But I am glad to say, under the circumstances, that just the evolution of safety in racing, and basically making drivers getting killed on almost a semi-regular basis, become less of a recurring theme. And I think under the circumstances, we should be very thankful for the fact that safety in racing, a lot like many other things in the evolution of technology, has come a long way. And that does basically include the safety of most sports if you think about it. I mean, hell, even the safety in the NFL has gone further than what it was about 20 years ago. And there are still times where you will see serious injuries among certain players. I did also notice something about one of the Detroit Lions players also suffering from a head and neck injury during a preseason game, but thankfully he did manage. But thankfully, however, he was able to remain stable in hospital, and under the circumstances he is alive. Of course, head and neck injuries used to happen in sport all the time. But thankfully, because there are more safety restraints in place, and also, well, a bit more padding inside those helmets to essentially cushion some of the blows they take, I am definitely glad to say that while you do occasionally see big hits both on the field as well as on the racetrack, you can at least say that the safety improvements made for the hits to be survivable. A lot like most things, that is one thing I can say with the theory of evolution that I am thankful for. I couldn't tell you what the name of the Lions player was exactly, but It was honestly quite similar to the Damar Hamlin incident that happened, well, 2 years before, when Buffalo was, I think, playing the Cincinnati Bengals. I couldn't say for sure if it was a playoff game or not, but I know that Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills had a cardiac arrest on the field. And although it did look like it might have been one of those potentially grave instances that we feared, amazingly, a lot like most athletes today, when they have those near-death experiences, we are thankful to say that they are definitely survivable. Because you never like to see anyone getting either seriously hurt or killed in sports, regardless of who it is. Plus, if it comes down to sacrificing competition in the name of safety, then I will gladly accept that. Because I have seen enough clips of incidents in racing that have proven to be fatal. And if you're asking me what 3 racing accidents stick out to me the most, well, there's 3. The first one, and all of these, by the way, are fatal accidents, but the ones that stick out to me the most are probably those of Ayrton Senna, Dale Earnhardt Sr., and there's also Dan Weldon. Yeah, those are the ones that stick out to me the most. Ayrton Senna, Dale Earnhardt, and Dan Weldon. Those are probably the accidents that stick out in my mind the most, and also the ones that I have seen video footage of. To easily tell you if whether or not the impacts were fatal. Because in essence, they definitely were. And I think it also reminds us that while there are still instances where those sorts of things can still happen, it's amazing to think that they are a lot less common than they used to be. And for that, as I said before, I am very thankful to say that we live in a much improved age of safety in pretty much all sports. Anyways, I win. In spite of me basically going off on a rant about safety. But there we go. So the Bentley Speed 8 takes second over the Nissan R92, then it's the R390 in fourth, followed by the Mazda in fifth, and then it is the Toyota in last. 4 wins in a row now, and that only took me less than 50 minutes to get there, once I really got my head down. So, 18-point advantage over the R92, heading in to test course, where this will be the halfway point of the GT All-Stars, and where I can finally say this will be done. So, everyone has managed to finish above last now, and we have had a bit of parity among the running order. But now we head to test course, and where for this, I'm going to use my usual tactic, which is to increase the speed slightly just to keep it competitive, but I think that should be enough. Okay, now it should be enough for me to pull this off. The speeds are honestly going to be so close that you quite literally have to be prepared for this. So, 4 races in a row now won. Let's try and see if we can make it 5 in a row. There is no way in hell I am doing this again once I have won this. If I achieve the sweep in this, then basically I will not do this again. Because personally, I really don't want to. I know I haven't increased my top speed by much, but I want it to be enough for me to at least make it so if it comes down to a sword fight between me and the R92, we at least are there to stay competitive. And the R390 comes up through the field just a little bit, and I managed to clear the R92, as I think I hit a top speed of 247 when I passed him. However, I have the slightly better speed, which is why I'm ahead of him. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is one of only, well, the second of only 3 or 4 times that I actually get to race a test course in this game, which under the circumstances is significantly less than the amount of times we had to race test course in GT3, which I think was at least 20 times, if not more, because of how many events, because of just how many events involved test course. It was honestly just ridiculous with how much of it we had to do. And the R92 is closing in. I think I'm going to let him try and pass me, and he does temporarily. However, I can just as easily get back past him if I just drop behind and just do that. And basically get the slingshot on him, essentially. I wanted to at least make sure that I was ending this off with a close battle. And in this instance, I seem to be doing that pretty well. As we're pretty much inseparable. Sure, I may not be hitting the speed limiter as much as the R92 probably is, but I think I have enough speed to hold on to my position when it comes to taking the slingshots, because my car is slightly faster than the R92, and it also means that with my higher top speed, I can also hold him off. He's coming back again, but he's not going to pass me. We're very much in a dogfight here, as it currently stands, and thankfully this race is only 3 laps, which means we don't have to be battling him for too long. This is about as close as you can get between the R89 and the R92. And even if I do lose this race, and I manage to lose it in a dogfight, it will be frustrating to some degree, but it'll also be satisfying because, well, we both drove a good race. And And that's honestly the way it's better if it stands. That's partly why I only gave it the slight transmission adjustment, because I wanted to make sure that this really was a dogfight, and that's pretty much what it is. Basically, the sort of high-speed thriller that you would expect to see at a place like this, with two equally good machines just basically battling tooth and nail. And it looks as though with my slightly better speed, I am going to beat the R92 by less than 1/10 of a second. I win the dogfight over the R92, with the Bentley 3rd, the Nissan R390 4th, the 787B 5th, and the Toyota 7 6th and last. So it is a clean sweep in the first half of the GT All-Stars. And both the Bentley and the R390 were just behind me. So those are your points after 5 rounds, as I have a 22-point advantage over the R92. And in all honesty, that actually felt really good. I mean, yeah, sure, I know the margin was very much razor tight, but I still managed to pull it off, because my car was slightly better than the R92. And that's what I've proven. So 50 points to me, 28 points to the R92, 18 points to the Bentley, who now takes over 3rd over the Mazda 787B. The Toyota 7 is still 5th in points, and the Nissan R390 is now just 1 point behind the Toyota 7. And now I am going to save the game. So that'll do it for part 1, and now we will move on to part 2.